Morning, everybody. It's great to see you. And as Vanessa said at the start of the service, this morning's our third week where we've been looking at the whole area of communion, what Jesus did in this meal, what he set up amongst us, and how we can respond to that. The reason that we've been doing that is not because our theology has changed, but because we want to change a few of our practices to respond in a better way to our theology and what we believe is happening in this meal. And if you were here over the last 2 weeks, you'll know that we've talked about the fact that communion, Vanessa's used that word sacrament, which for some might be a big, strange word, but sacrament really is about a physical act, something that we do physically, that Jesus commanded us to do, that contains within it a means by which God ministers his grace to us, or we might say we encounter God in a very special way. We talked about the other sacrament that we hold together. Next week we're going to be doing one of those, baptism, a physical act, something we do physically that we believe in that moment there is a special way that God meets us in that physical act that he doesn't meet us in any other way in any other part of life. Okay, so that's what we believe communion is. And Tim talked in the first week about 6 different things that communion does. The vertical, our connection to God, that it is a remembering. Paul tells us that Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. That it is, I'm forgetting them now, a symbol, it's symbolic, it's a symbolic act, and that it is a means of grace to us as well. And then the horizontal, our relationship to one another, that we proclaim. Jesus says, you proclaim my death until I come. We proclaim his death to one another and to the world as we do this. But also it's a point of identity and it's a point of unity. So that is what communion is. And I talked last week about some of the ways we're slightly changing our practice. And so we're going to practice that today. We're going to have a big practice together. Is that okay? And it might go wrong, and that's okay. We can change things as we go, but we're really excited. And what we wanted to do this week, really, and it's good we've got some good time to do this, is we wanted to dig into some of the elders and some of their heart and their thoughts around this. Because, as you know, I hope, we don't just sort of make these decisions just off the top, randomly. But often as leaders, we're on a bit of a journey. We believe God's doing some things amongst us. And often this takes many weeks or months or even years. And we talked a bit about that last week, that actually we've been on a long journey of communion, talking about the body and the blood of Jesus for many years. So we're going to invite some of the elders to hear from them. Is that okay? So we'll do that, we'll hear their heart, and then we'll take communion together. So, Vanessa, Stace, do you want to come and join me on the stage? Should we give them a round of applause as they join us? That'd be great. I'll move this. Ooh. Wonderful. So if you don't know, we're led by a team of elders. Not every elder is here. There's the 4 of us, plus Adrian, who just spoke, and Tim Murray as well, who's around. But I wanted to talk to you guys. Is that okay? Yeah, man. Good. They absolutely love doing things like this. No, they don't. Cool. So Vanessa, I'm going to come to you first because I know we've had lots of chats about this over the last few months, but I really see God doing something in you, in your heart, in your life around communion. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that journey and what God has been doing recently?
Yeah, I'd love to, actually. I've got a few notes on my phone. Excuse me with my phone out, but it's the most helpful way because I may not remember to say everything I want to say. But probably over the last 18 months, 2 years, has been quite a significant journey for me in communion. But I think really seeds were sown a little bit in me many years ago. I became a Christian as a young adult. I wasn't brought up in a Christian home, so had no going to church or anything. So when I became a Christian and went to church, it was all a bit bewildering, if I'm honest. And I found communion quite intimidating. And it used to create quite a bit of anxiety in me. I think I never felt good enough. like I didn't belong, and it was quite a barrier for me. And then when I met Paul, he's involved in children's and family ministry, and we've travelled around lots of churches together, and every church does it so differently. And I used to get really anxious going to different churches because every church would do it differently. Some would say special words, and it's the not knowing kind of what to expect, which started me thinking about communion. And then there was the famous occasion when we went to an Anglican church, and I didn't realise this is how they did it, but I literally wrestled the vicar for the cup because I kind of had to kneel at the front, and he gave me the cup, and I thought I would just take the cup from him. Oh, no. So we had this little kind of thing going on, and I think he told me through movement that I was not to take the cup. But anyway, I haven't been back to that church since, but never mind. And then when you oversee as well and responsible for the services, you do have to think it through loads. We think through a lot of the things we do, and it's good and right to do so. But I've been through a real questioning season. So I was a bit like kind of deconstructing communion. So if you've been around me in close proximity, you'll probably be aware of this. But, well, why are we doing communion? It's a bit like a child, isn't it, really? Why are we doing it? What is the significance of it? Do we actually really value it? And if we didn't do it, if we went for a period of time and we didn't do it, would anybody greatly notice? Would, we have so many emails that we wouldn't know what to do with? And it's just really made me think again about communion. And we went on a journey, a few of us. We read a book from Tom Wright, which is excellent. It's a really small book, and it's called, I think, The Meal That Jesus Gave Us. And I think what's happened for me, I know other people in our church family have been through this journey themselves. I know that we've had teaching many years ago from Paul Miller, and a lot of people have been through this communion. But for me, it's been a real kind of fresh journey. And it was, so I understood the remembrance part of it. So I always understood that communion was remembering, and rightly so. But I think what has happened to me was understanding this phrase, means of grace. And actually understanding that communion is a gift, isn't it, to us, I believe. That actually when we receive it, there's nothing magical about, the bread that we're going to have or the grape juice to represent wine that we're going to have today. But it's about the sustaining and the strength, and that in it we encounter God in a different way. And I feel that I have personally encountered God in a different way. So just to give you a little bit of context and story, last year we were having a family situation that was really, really difficult. And we all go through times, don't we, when things are really difficult. And I just really needed some help and strength, really. We got friends praying for us, but I decided, and I'd never done this before, to take communion on my own. And at the start of every morning, I would have communion. And I feel I profoundly encountered the Lord in it. The situation didn't change dramatically overnight, but I think what happened in me was, it was the strength that I felt that God gave me to be able to handle the situation and putting life in its right perspective. That actually, He is Lord, I am not. It's about that dependence and that strength coming from Him, really. And for me, communion, it's the physicality of it that's really helpful and tangible, isn't it? Actual bread that we eat, actually something that we drink, that actually we have to physically do something. And I think in a world that constantly changes and that is so challenging, and we all stumble in following Jesus, if we're really honest, we're not all on our A game, are we? Because we can't be, because of the human condition and our sinful hearts. But what communion does is I think it gives us something really definite, and it makes it not about us and not about me. And, last night Paul and I shared communion together because he's out speaking this morning. And, there is some anxiety when we believe this is right, but when we do this, we feel slightly anxious and also really excited. But actually, what it helped me to do was just put things in its right perspective. And there's such a releasing about that. And I believe that there's I could talk for a long time and I will shut up in a minute, but there's a mystery in communion as well, isn't there? There's something, I believe, that spiritually happens when we receive it in the right way, which I think is really profound. So my prayer for us as a church family is actually that we start to encounter God more in this together, that it's not just about me individually, but actually that we all the Lord starts to do something more in us.
That's fantastic. And the word I want to pick up on there that you just said was excited. And wouldn't it be great if actually we saw it was communion and we were excited? Like that'd be a change when we thought, okay, it's communion this morning. Fantastic. There was that sense of anticipation, excitement that we're going to encounter God in a very different and unique way. So thanks for that. Steve, I know you've been reading about communion. What's God been stirring you around this whole area?
Morning. I've been reading about it because apparently I have to have an opinion on things now. So I thought I'd read other people's opinions to help shape mine. And when I started reading, I came across Martin Luther. So Martin Luther, Protestant Reformation, kind of like father of Reformation. This is after he's kind of like left the Roman Catholic Church. There's a story about when one of his ministers was serving communion, spilt the wine, and Martin Luther got down on his hands and knees and licked it up. He also excommunicated the minister, which means you're no longer part of the church. I think it's a bit harsh, but I thought, why would he do this? Why would the father of Protestantism have such a high regard for the sacrament and communion? And then I read other things, and someone says, being a Christian is not about what you believe necessarily. It's not about what you do necessarily. It's about who you praise. And actually, communion is around, in essence, who we praise and what our praise is focused on. And then another writer was talking about how in communion, it's kind of like a victory lap with Jesus. And talking about the celebrating and the future banquet. And you kind of think, most of my practice is about how bad I've been and how kind of thank you that I am forgiven, which I think is part of it. I never thought of it about joining with the saints and celebrating who Jesus is. So I thought that was really interesting. And then another quote, someone else said, this is not an individualistic business where people make their communion, but rather a corporate activity where the whole church celebrates union with Christ and each member recognises his or her role in the body. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. A mixture of different readings, some funny, some inspiring, but that's helped kind of get me interested in it, I guess.
Fantastic. And we spoke last week about some of the changes, only slight. As we said, our theology remains really what we've believed for many years, although God is always revealing things, isn't he, and shaping that and opening our eyes. But there are some changes. One of the things that won't change is that we teach that communion is for Christians. We've done that for a while. We've spoken about that for a while. and that we'll, of course, offer to pray for those who aren't Christians and bless them. We don't judge people who aren't Christians, and we love having people who aren't Christians amongst us. But we do believe that communion is for Christians. So I just thought I'd come to you, Stace, if that's all right, brother, because we know, and those of you who know Stace will know that you work a lot with those who would say they don't have a Christian faith, or those that are on some sort of journey. And I just wanted to get your take on it, really. Why do you think that's important, and how do you think it's going to impact those maybe amongst us, which I'm sure there will be this morning, who would say they're not Christians? How would it impact them?
Morning. So, for me, in my situation, it's good to have a good introduction to something. And if you have a bad or a woolly introduction, it makes things difficult. And when someone's either expressed an interest or there's something stirring in someone, we then start a journey. And making sure that the foundations are solid and that the introduction is one that encourages backwards and forwards, so it isn't just about me telling somebody what the situation is or what things are, but actually encouraging questions to come forward as well. Just means that it irons out the creases and gives a good, healthy, not just foundation, but openness to the things that will arise and come out of the situation of being a Christian or pursuing it. And when I first became a Christian, my first church weren't used to having people arriving because they hadn't had anybody new for quite some time. So I hit the ground and was expected to know everything and hit the ground running, which didn't really happen very well, to be honest with you. So when it came to communion, I didn't understand what it was, didn't understand how it worked, and was hit with a lot of rules that I didn't understand. So it caused offence in me. And it took a little while for that to be made right. And it took somebody else to do it because they didn't get that I didn't understand it. So remembering what had happened to me means then that I always want to make sure that other people understand and have a good understanding of what it is that's about.
Yeah. And we realise that, this is obviously a pastoral issue, isn't it? You want to be loving and kind and thoughtful to people. We don't want people to feel excluded. Although there is a sense of exclusion, Jesus says, "Come follow me," and we have to make that choice. Do we want to follow Jesus or do we not want to follow Jesus? And if we don't, that has, consequences. And if we do, that has consequences. And so what we will do every time we lead communion in a public space is we'll talk about that it is for Christians, but we hope that comes across loving and caring for those who aren't Christians to help them think about, okay, what is this then? And where am I in my journey of faith? Steve, we recognised last week that actually that has a real impact then on unbaptized children. Because actually, if you're a child in a family of faith, it's not always as clear as maybe Vanessa and Stacey's journey of like, I was out, now I'm in. Actually, there's a little bit of, am I out, am I in? And that goes on throughout our childhood. So we talked last week about that there's two views on that. I won't go into it now, but the teaching is there that some would hold that actually within a family of faith, you can take communion under the authority of the parents. Others would hold actually it's better to wait until that child has been baptized. Steve, I just wonder, you have young children. How do you think that'll impact you and other families and people in your position?
So it's on the list of things that me and Becky need to talk about. So that list keeps growing. But so it's something we need to work through. In reality, this kind of came up for us as a family a little while ago. I don't quite remember how it happened. This isn't some kind of like godly plan that we have for our kids. But I think one of them said, I'd like to take communion when we were at home. So we kind of did it at home, but probably more of a love meal. We put a candle in the middle of the table, read some scriptures, got some bread out, got some Ribena, which is a treat for them because normally they have water. And it was really nice. And we've probably done that 3 or 4 times, normally when the kids ask. Sometimes it's really nice and a bit kind of like profound. Other times they're fighting over who can eat the most bread and who can light the candle and all the rest of it. But it made us think that actually we want them formation's really important, isn't it, for all of us? And I think we're all formed by our culture, and obviously Adrian and Tim and stuff really teach into that. And I think helping our kids be formed in culture and understand why we do these things is important. Whether that is actually a spiritual encounter moment, I'm not sure, but I think it's good. Now, actually, if one of them said we want to take communion at church, I think we'd have to work that through with them, because I definitely believe that like kids can be followers of Jesus. So if they can, then obviously they can take communion. But there is something about, do they know? So Ezra at 3, I don't think he gets salvation and sin or any of that kind of stuff. Reuben might, so probably we'd have to have some conversation with him before we did that. And also I'd need to chat to Becky, because I can't just decide these things.
And that's really good, and we'd really encourage all parents, to be thinking about that now, and also not to feel like an individual pressure, like you've got to make the right decision. We as elders would love to support you with that. I'm sure many of you will have your own connections and networks that you can work through that. Listen to the teaching. We might do a little bit of extra teaching on it as well. And we just think there's room in the New Testament really for both views to be held and to be honoured and to be recognised, and us not to judge. So when we do communion, if children do come forward, we will serve them communion. We'd want it to be done appropriately and for them to understand what we're doing. And we just really trust you as parents and want to work with you. There's different views in the elders. We hold slightly different views on it. And there would be those that wouldn't take communion, wouldn't have their children until they're baptised take communion, which has good theological grounding as well. So we won't do questions here, mate. Sorry, it's just because of the stream and things like that. But I will come to you at the end. No worries. Vanessa, another change is that we're going to invite members of our church family to serve communion, and we're going to receive communion. And this might be probably the biggest thing that feels different in our practice, that actually someone is going to give us communion. Someone's going to serve us that communion. And we talked about, which has already been mentioned, about that kind of break in this individualized, I come and take communion and it's about me and God, but actually becomes a communal act that we're doing together. I just wondered on your thoughts, Vanessa, on how do you think that's going to impact our practice, but also our understanding, our theology of communion?
Yeah, I think in some ways it's small but quite profound. And really it's changing our practice to match with our theology, isn't it? And so I think it will help us to view it not as an individual thing, because we've, in recent years, probably more post-COVID, we've kind of come to the front and taken it off the tables. But I think when you take it from somebody, I think it means that we will evaluate it more as a body and hold it together, that actually my life impacts your life. I can't just live my life separately. And actually the fact that we come and take that from a member of our church family, I think we'll feel quite uncomfortable in some ways, but I think also really quite moving. Paul and I I spent many years in the northeast of England as a young adult. Me and Paul went to church there, and that was the practice there. I don't know whether I've ever said actually, but there was somebody, and we were only small. There was only about 50 of us in the church, but it was really intimate, and it brought this lovely kind of unity and kind of family element to it, really. So I see that element in it, which I think will be really, really good for us and help us to know that we do belong, and how we behave and everything impacts each other. But also, I think what we are going to do is, like, the people that are serving are actually going to give the bread and give the wine. And actually, in life, it doesn't always feel easy to receive, does it? I don't know whether you've ever been on the receiving end of the meal rota, but when we cook, when people have had a baby, I'm looking at John and Laura actually at the back here, because they're in the middle of receiving meals. But actually, it's amazing, but it's also quite hard to receive as well, isn't it? It's kind of it makes you feel quite vulnerable, I think. So I think there's something in that which is really rather beautiful. And also the fact that this is a free gift to us. Yeah. You know, actually, how profound is that? And what an actual physical reminder when someone gives you the bread and gives you the wine. This is a gift from Jesus. And actually, it's an opportunity where we can minister to each other. So I think we are going to profoundly encounter the Lord. And when I say encounter the Lord, it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh my goodness, you know, we have this moment where emotional moment. I think what we'll see is over weeks and months, you know, that something will kind of occur and change in our heart. So it's not like we have to feel it in the moment. We might do, and that's fantastic. But I think what will happen is we'll start to live some of this out. I would expect to see us closer in our loving relationships and maybe more honest and vulnerable with each other. But also I would expect to see our awareness of what Jesus has done and all of that to increase as well. Isn't that exciting? I kind of feel like I want to cry because it's so deep within me, the excitement, but I just feel something like that God wants to do amongst us, really.
I think that's one of the beautiful things about it being a physical act. So much of our tradition, which I love our tradition, I'm a big part of it, I'm a big fan of it, but one of its criticisms is it's very feelings-based. Yeah, you have to feel God, and some of us don't feel God. We might come to a service and feel nothing. One of the beautiful things about a physical act is you know that it's happened. Yeah. You haven't got to feel. So when Amelia's baptised next weekend, if she comes out the water and feels the same, we don't say, oh, well, should we dunk her again? Until she feels something, keep dunking her until, you know, we say, done, because she's done the act. Jesus' promise is there, and what has happened, don't we? We hold that. Can we hold the same for communion? That actually, as we eat the bread and we drink the cup, we have encountered God. We might feel nothing. We might feel something. Fantastic. We might feel nothing, but we know because we're obedient to Jesus and we're taking part in that sacrament that we encounter God and that it's having an effect on our life, even if we don't see it or feel it. Yeah. I think that's a great point. There are some other changes we've gone through. So we have grape juice, much to Vanessa's hard work, tracking some down. So we're going to have to work. I think you did 7 supermarkets, you said, didn't you?
7. So you think, yeah, we'll switch to grape juice. It's a lot harder to find grape juice than I anticipated, but the Lord has provided. So
we need some work. We've also got, just to say, just practically all of our bread is gluten-free. We thought that's a good thing to do, so some people struggle, so that can make sure everybody, as much as we can take part in that. But the other part we talked about last week was the liturgy, and we recognise that every church, whether it's more formal or informal, has some kind of liturgy. Liturgy just means form of worship, and that we have our liturgy, but that actually we recognise there are moments where a more structured or formal liturgy is right. We talked about weddings, funerals, dedications, and actually what we feel is communion and baptism give us an opportunity to be a little bit more structured and a bit more formal. So we're going to be seeing a bit more of that as people lead. We're still leaving room for variety, so we're not having a set thing that we go through every time. Different facilitators will lead it in a different way. But we're going to encourage them to think through the scriptures they use, the words that are used, and how it's shared. Stace, I know we've journeyed a little bit about kind of this. When we looked at the Apostles' Creed together as elders. We've preached on that as well. And how structuring our belief can be helpful. So I just wondered on your thoughts on introducing this, maybe more set prayers or scriptures into this time of communion.
So anybody that knows me knows I'm incredibly structured. No, not at all. For me, I had to really stop, think, and work this through, because I wouldn't call myself random, but I very much go with the flow, would be the best way to put it. So having a process that was very different to that was something I had to really stop and work through. And what I was pleasantly surprised by is there's a security in that. And the security that you get from an order, structure, liturgy, however you want to term it, is something that you can almost relax into. And because you know what's coming, you understand why and what it's for, that gives you a base and a place to be at peace, comfort, and just be able to be. So it almost relieves you of certain things that you would perhaps hold quite tensely. There's just no need for that. So it just gives you a base to just to be released. And that is just incredible. And if that isn't a pattern or a part of the personality of Jesus, I don't know what is. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then just to close, Steve, I know that you're passionate about encounter. So I wanted to come to you and how do you think we can encounter Jesus in this moment?
So, well, this is massive, isn't it? We're a Bible-believing church. We believe God can move today like he moved in the past. If you look at the early church, if you look at Acts, look in Acts 2, they were seeing amazing signs and wonders. What did they do daily? It really didn't talk about singing, preaching, all the rest of it. I'm sure they did, but it says they did the Lord's Supper, and you can see what they were doing. When we think about the things that Jesus have told us to do, he said, "Do this." Again, in a way that he didn't say necessarily do other things. I think if we look at the reality of our world, the Bible talks about us not fighting flesh and blood, but spirituality, spirits and powers and things that we can't see. That the essence is we're in this spiritual warfare, aren't we? And the spiritual world is as real as the physical world. And it's a physical act, but it has spiritual connotations. So really, I think as a Bible-believing church, this is kind of one of the key places of encounter, one of the places where we can go, okay, Lord, you are with us. Empower us, enable us for the fight. And I think actually reclaiming some of that is really important.
Oh man, I agree. Thanks all. Should we give a round of applause?